Okay. Uh, Hello, everyone. Whoever is here, I can. Oh, Elizabeth. Oh, Elizabeth is here. I didn't expect her. Hi, Elizabeth. Tell me something. Say hello. I want to hear your voice before I start.
I think it takes her a minute to get put into the queue.
Where are you, Elizabeth? Ah, there she is. Hey,
Hi, Stasha.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Right, wait, I have to, because I started the presentation, so I had to. Well, it's really, it's been a long time, right? How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so let's start. Okay, well, talking to Petra, how we could present Croatia in kind of different ways and different perspectives. So, I said I would personally like to pick, biological diversity of Croatia as something to talk about, and of course, particularly, uh, we we don't have time. I could talk forever about diversity of life in this little country. So I will today focus on what put Croatia on the global map, biodiversity. So biological diversity significance. So it was back in 2000. I was part of a project which was funded by the United Nations Development Program with the goal to evaluate biological diversity significance of Croatia. It was quite a large team, and our task was to collect all the data and contact all the people working in different fields and different institutions, and then see what comes out. So basically today I will present to you part of these findings from the year 2000, actually kind of backed with a little bit more information which is contemporary. So, when I was asked to join this project, I said, this will be easy because Croatia is a little country, and actually I'm extremely happy when people know where Croatia is on the map, because compared to America, it's just a grain of sand. However, being so small, it has great variety of habitats and ecosystems and biomes. So, beside, our most famous coastline, we have very rich continental habitats with lots of still unpolluted water, which I'm very happy about it. And beside mountainous regions with a lot of karst and vast network of caves along the entire coastline, very similar to the Central America cave system. And, we can see all kinds of beautiful formations and sometimes be surprised with the species that we see in the vicinity. For instance, this is one species of orchids that we have in Croatia among the 7 different ones. I don't want to bother you with orchids, but how did I actually find out about orchids? Because I was asked to guide a group of people who are orchid lovers. And I was amazed that there is like membership, there's more than a couple of million people around the world that travel all the time and take pictures of orchids around the world. So, they came to, I had no idea. So actually they kind of pointed out, these are the species. And of course, this is one picture I took when I was with them in April. And of course, the karst systems and very unique locations like Plitvice Lakes, which are under UNESCO protection. And of course, the Mediterranean biome, the coastline, which is simply amazing all the way from the south to the north. And of course, plus, the underwater life. And imagine we have a sea where you actually can see fish, which is kind of amazing always. And I'm surprised every time I dive, so you can actually see big predators. Sometimes you have to dive a little bit deeper. And this is what happens when you don't have a flash with yourself. But the sceneries are simply amazing. So, I was kind of thinking when I was in this project, that the entire country will be kind of evaluated as of global biodiversity significance. But, in science, we're always surprised. And even though with all this diversity and beauty, and here you can see the map of Croatia, and only national parks and nature parks. And in Europe, we're on the first place on the area which is protected or covered with any form of legislation umbrella. However, after analyzing all the data collected, there are only 4 spots that actually put us on the map of global diversity, which you can see painted in yellow. So I will kind of briefly focus on these 4 areas and to tell you why these spots were defined as of global biodiversity significance. In these 4 spots, this is what we found. 2,276 species, 86 rare, endangered. And of course, coral reef, actually the coral reef in National Park Net is the northernmost coral reef functioning as a real reef, what you see on this picture. And of course, some mammals which have gone extinct, like the Mediterranean monk seal, which were killed, the last family, by fishermen in 1956. So these are the important sites: National Park Net, Nature Park Biokovo, National Park Formative, and of course, newly formed Nature Park Lostoria. So National Park Net covers 1/3 of the island, the western part, and the borders were drawn based on the maps from the Austrian-Hungarian Monarchy Forestry Department, and they were active in this part of the island using Aleppo pine, which is very abundant. As you can see, this area is almost completely covered with the Aleppo pine, introduced by the Greeks 3,500 years ago. And actually the records show that the Greeks introduced the Aleppo pine because they liked the shade of this particular pine. And of course, 3,500 years later, all the southern exposures are almost entirely covered with the species. So Austrian monarchy, they kind of used Aleppo pine, they cut it and they transported to Mostar. There was a paper pulp factory, and they have then exported paper to the empire. So what was good about that time is that, you know, even today in Croatian forestry department uses the methods which were introduced and left behind by the Austrian-Hungarian forestry department, and that is how to sustainably use the forests and how to live in that environment by not making damage, so we can use the resource for a long period of time. And this is one of the important features of this particular national park, where actually the locals are responsible for what we see today. And of course, you know, this was recognized by the former President Tito, who loved to come to this island and spend time in this 12th century monastery on this little island. And he wanted to build a residence. So he organized a lot of parties and did also some damage, because he wanted to go out and use his fast boat. So he deepened and widened the channel that connects the lakes. And of course, this changed the regime of currents in the lakes and exchanged with the open sea. And at that time, we lost one species, the endemic species of oysters, which was only living in this lake. However, we gained other things. So we gained the coral reef, which occupies this area over here, because these currents enabled the growth of these coral species, and which attracted, of course, more life. So there is always good and bad. Now, so I was thinking, you know, this coral reef, and then, you know, the strict reserve, there is this one little patch, 1.5 hectares of mature Mediterranean oak forest, which was never touched by human hand and never burned, pristine condition. However, that didn't put RIT on the global biodiversity significance list, but this species did. That was my surprise too. This is a species of jellyfish, Aurelia, which swarms only in the little marine lake in the national park, and nowhere else on the planet. So there were 3 different groups, one from the United States, one from France, one from Slovenia, that studied its DNA, and they found similarity. I don't know how, I didn't read all the papers, with the jellyfish that were abundant in the world seas and oceans 22 million years ago. How they got that conclusion, I don't know, but if compared to the genetic signatures of the other species around the world, there is nothing similar. So it was flagged as F1 species, and actually this is what put National Park RIT on the global map of biological diversity significance. So I will just give you a quick tour once we're in the RIT to the top of one seamount in the vicinity. So you can see RIT also from a different perspective. And it will be just one breath visit. Enjoy. Yeah, all the predators, when they see me, they always escape. I don't know why. And I'll observe here, this is interesting. I'm swimming towards a school of little fish, needles. And this is just one fantastic example of biomimicry. So if I didn't tell you that, these are fish, you wouldn't know. So this is quite, this doesn't work. So from it, we go to Bioko. So they call it the stone in the sky and the sky in the stone because, looking from distance, it looks just like a big rock. So when we say, well, what's important here? Well, I'll tell you a little story. So during the last ice age, the outer Croatian islands were the end zone of the glaciers in Europe. And this mountain was sticking out above the glacier. It was surrounded by glaciers for more than 10,000 years. And because of the proximity of the sea, the temperatures on the mountain were not so cold. So most of the vegetation on this mountain survived and survived through entire ice age. And then after the glaciers retrieved, all these species which during these 10,000 years adapted to colder conditions now found themselves in the warming world. And they changed again. So what we have today on this mountain, most of the species, plant species that we find there are endemic. And we found them nowhere else on the planet. So this put Biokovo on the global biodiversity map. And moreover, because when we look at species richness just on this mountain, we come to some kind of fantastic revelation that when we count all the species on the mountain, there are more species of plants on this mountain than in England, Ireland, and Scotland together. So this can tell you something about the importance. And of course, besides vast cultural and heritage, for instance, like on Net, because we have habitations, human habitations that go thousands of years in back. So, if anyone is interested in history, there is more than plenty to talk about. But here I will give you a glimpse, look into a couple of these endemics on the mountain with the view down to the sea. And these are the species that we find solely there and nowhere else on the planet. And it's really amazing, especially when May and June, when they all start blossoming. It gives some kind of different perspective. Of course, being so unique and most of them are very healthy. They have different compounds in them than all the other species that we find, for instance, along the coast. And this makes them extremely interesting for pharmaceutical industry. So this is one of the major threats today to these plants, especially this one, because pharmaceutical industry pays like 150 euros for 1 kilogram of these plants. So what people do, because rangers are not on the mountain during the night, they come, they have their own paths, and they pick uncontrollably these plants, and which presents the major threat to their survival and existence. So it's the plants of the mountain that give its true colors. And then coming to Kornati National Park, the archipelago. This was also a surprise for me. I had no idea what was going on there. I always thought about, we have all these hundreds of islands, and I knew that it was found that 56% of all the marine fish that live in the Adriatic Sea, they come to spawn in this area because of all these little bays and sheltered areas. And of course, only Purara, this island out in the open sea, is proclaimed as a strict reserve. So no visitors allowed. Why? Because of the threats. And of course, nautical tourism and overfishing, and it's being kind of guarded especially. But this is not what the beauty of the Kornati Islands really is. And it's not the sheep, it's the tradition. So sheep herding on these islands has been going on continuously for more than 500 years. We don't have records to show us more. And all these islands are privately owned by the locals from the island of Murten. So what they did throughout 500 years, each family had 1-2 islands, so they would bring sheep to one island. They have very special boats made for transport of the sheep. And then when the sheep would eat everything on this island, they would transport the sheep to the other island. So what happened on these islands for hundreds of years was that sheep maintained ecological succession at the lowest levels, so like grass. So all these Mediterranean biome species were not given an opportunity to grow. And of course, this is a form of stress. And because of being stressed for hundreds of years, all these plants changed. And most of these plants, which normally are constituent of the Mediterranean biome, are now endemic. And of course, we had this war, and then now the COVID, and basically the government stepped in, and now the government is subsidizing these activities, because we know that if this tradition would stop, we have no idea what would happen to these plants in the years to come. And of course, the sunsets are unforgettable on these islands. And of course, the last place, the archipelago of Lostoria, which includes 46 islands, 46 fields, and 46 churches. The locals say that it's It's not a deliberate number, that it's just accident. And of course, you know, the human habitation also on this island goes back to thousands of years back in history, and we see the remains. And I have to show you this. This is the oldest standing chimney in Croatia, dates from the 15th century in the main village of Lostoria. And of course, you know, we have Roman remains and human activity that has been going on for years. But what actually happened is that after the Second World War, this archipelago became a military base for the Yugoslav army. And, you know, they drilled all these tunnels for submarines, for all these boats and radars and guns and rockets, who knows what. So the entire island is like a Swiss cheese today. But visitation to the island was not permitted. So there was no tourism at all until 1994-5. No one was allowed. And this enabled the conditions for all these natural occurring species to just flourish. And today, when we look at Lostoria from the air or closer, Lostoria is actually, we could call it a botanical garden of the Mediterranean biome. This is the only place in the entire Mediterranean where we can find all the species of the Mediterranean biome in its original form. So if one day we come to some senses and decide to kind of reforest or replant the Mediterranean, this is where we will have to go. And interestingly, as you can see, for instance, on this picture, there are no Aleppo pines on this island, which is kind of a good thing. I think I have to admit somebody who is kind of late. I'm sorry, people, I cannot read messages in chat. That would be too much for me. Maybe later. Let's see. Okay. And here is, well, another perspective from Lostoria, where I'm sure you will never go alone. Yeah. And then I had to rush out because that day the water was cold and I was swimming for 2.5 hours and I was extremely tired. But at least, you know, we had a glimpse look into this. Now, all these sites, plus everything else, is under tremendous threat and stress by human activities. So overgrazing, overuse of herbicides and pesticides. And for instance, here we can see this main pond. Michelle, can you let the people in?
Yes, sorry, I will do that. Thank you.
This is the main pond, and when we did the research, there were 7 species of endemic frogs. And because of the overuse, especially after 1991, when the island was open and people started using the most poisonous pesticides and herbicides, and all these frogs were gone within 1 year. And now they have a problem with mosquitoes because these frogs, they control the population of mosquitoes on the islands. So more pesticides required. And of course, floating waste. This is a problem of the entire coastline, which requires some kind of international collaboration, because this one little beach on the island of Net, every year, in average, they take away about 3.5 tons of plastic and trash. So what can we say? We are on the global biodiversity map, but how long will it last? We have no idea, because at the moment, I cannot tell you about the trends. Are the trends positive, neutral, or negative? Because no research is being conducted anywhere. There are so many issues that we as people have to deal with, because, for instance, this trash, what happens is most of it comes from Italy, Greece, and Albania, because the city of Naples made a contract with Albania to export all their trash to Albania. And what Albanians are doing when they receive the trash, they simply dump it into the sea, letting the currents and the winds to bring the trash into Croatia, so we have to deal with it. So there are all other aspects, about the microplastics in the ocean and their impact on the life. So threats wherever we look. So hopefully, in a couple of years, I will be able to tell you more news, but at least now you know why Croatia is of global biodiversity significance. And to end this with, I will also try to now show you another perspective of, let's do it like this, of our Croatian islands. One sunset, which was filmed on the island of Šipan 2 years ago. I'm sorry. And my computer, ancient technology, doesn't like this new technology, HD. So it's kind of slow, but I think you will get the picture and the idea why I wanted to show you this. And what I would say, this is Croatia as I know it. So there in the distance we can see the island of Rit. And to the northwest, the RIT Islands and Orchids Peninsula. And with this, I will finish for today. And I hope you like my pictures. And now I think I can spend more time with chat and see.
Sasha, since we have a little bit of time, I don't know if anyone in the anyone watching has any questions. You have time to answer any questions. If people want to raise their hand, turn on the camera.
And yes, this meeting was still recorded, so will be, I believe, available to everyone.
Stasha, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
I know that Croatia's stayed or tried to stay open as much as possible compared to many countries regarding COVID. But I saw, reports around the globe how in this, year period of giving natural destinations a break from heavy tourism, that destinations were seeing a rebound in certain natural changes for the positive. Did anything like that occur in Croatia? Did you see anything maybe under less stress that may have rebounded a little bit better due to less mass tourism?
Yes, primarily in the continental region, because especially during the past 2 years, there was just simply a mess with all these mega yachts and nautical tourism. So mega yachts, like they occupied the entire coast, including people like Mark Zuckerberg, who spent like 3 weeks on his yacht there. But in the continent, and the good thing is that what is happening currently now, and there's a big campaign going on. There are a lot of volunteers joining this initiative to clean the caves and to clean the rivers around Croatia. So, and this is what I've never noticed before, but I think people like to go out, and they feel good about doing something great, as cleaning a cave, cleaning a river, being part of something bigger than they are. But when talking about the coast, well, I cannot say that for the coast because fishing didn't stop. So if you compare, for instance, from 5 years ago, the normal catch in the season of sardines, we would have 6 to 7 sardines in 1 kilogram. And last year, it was 12 to 18 required. So the sizes of these fish, they're dramatically going down. So how anchovies are almost gone from the Adriatic. There is no more big fish because all these fishermen now, they have these horizontal eco sounders and sonars, and they can detect migrating schools, and they just extract everything. So there are good stories, there are bad stories, but I'm undecided in terms of saying that this is dramatically being better. And of course, mass tourism is localized, so mass tourism is not there, but the impact of tourism is still here because actually a lot of people come. Elizabeth, I saw that you wanted to ask me something.
I was wondering if there was any information about how climate change is going to impact these parks.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know that I'm kind of into this. So we actually have an invasion of tropical species into the Adriatic, and you know all these mosquitoes are coming in from the east. But the Adriatic is under extreme pressure. So currently we have 49 tropical species of fish and 53 tropical species of crabs. And of course, Cauler paracemosa is kind of going wild. Well, you know the area around Dubrovnik, so you know the entire seafloor from Dubrovnik Old Harbor to Cavtat is from the surface down to 95 meters, completely covered with Cauler paracemosa. So yeah, there is quite an impact because the Adriatic warmed up more than 1.5 degrees, which allows most of these tropical species to survive. And you know, all these fish are now normally spawning in the Adriatic and pushing out uh, these autochthonous fish. And this is what I'm currently trying to explain to the people, that you know the restaurants are responsible because you know they create the demand. You know they all want all these traditionally offered species of fish, and they say, well, you know, why don't you start catching barracuda? We have this Mediterranean barracuda, which is like a pest. And 2 years ago, I caught one 8.5 kilograms. And it has fantastic white meat. You can cook it, you can grill it, you can do anything, but they don't want to hear about using Barracuda because they say this is poisonous, and this is a completely different species. Only it looks like Pacific Barracuda, but this one really just belongs to the Mediterranean. And of course the Posidonia oceanica, the endemic of the Mediterranean, is well in great peril because of the temperatures, and of course the invasion of Cauler paracemosa. And you know the Italians are now having a campaign. They're seeding. They they made this special technology with nylon nets, and they're seeding Posidonia because of course they did a lot of damage with dredging. So and now we have these increased temperatures and you know no regulations with sewage still. And but you know people are coming to senses because you know when I was talking about internal waves 25 years ago, they told me that I was crazy. And then now a geophysicist is talking about that they detected internal waves and that we might have a problem with this aspect of coastal mixing. And now it's panic. Well, what are we going to do? Because this tells people that, you know, the stories that all these sewage inlets, which are during the summer under the halocline, picnicline, um, all these materials, including bacteria and viruses, they can surface up and affect any beaches. And when you look at, for instance, the data from the sanitation monitoring of Croatian beaches, even during these COVID years, uh, all the Croatian beaches, for instance, the number of fecal coliform bacteria per 100 milliliters of seawater is above 200. And, you know, the world standard is 200. So above 200, you have to close the beach. We're not closing anything, and nobody's doing anything about it. So, you know, it's tough, but I believe the entire world has these issues, and now, of course, priority is COVID. And yes, Rick, I got my first shot. Yeah, AstraZeneca. It knocked me out for 3 days, but I'm still alive.
I was worried about the side effects after the video you sent me.
Yeah, well, I think I'll survive. Did I answer your question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, that was a very thorough answer. And many of the things that you described were a problem when I was there, what,
Yeah.
9 years ago. I mean, then too, when they were taking the water samples on the beaches, it was like you were telling us that they're all above it, and the government was saying, "Oh no, it's totally fine."
And it still is.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that it's not about the problem of you know, toilets on the beach and people on the beach, but actually the percentage of houses, and especially wild buildings that have semi-porous septic tanks, which, you know, this is karst.
Yeah.
Everything is connected. There is a plumbing system on the ground, and you don't know where the pipes are, but it's all interconnected. Everything goes into the sea. So yeah, we're struggling.
We actually have the same problem with invasive species and trying to convince people to eat them. There's a species in Florida called lionfish.
Yeah.
That's become a huge problem, and they're trying to convince people to eat them.
But you know, I didn't try lionfish, but you know, I'm sure that it tastes great. So it's just, you know, I don't know, turn it into some fast food item. Maybe it'll get better. Is there anyone else?
Do you think, Sasha, that that enough people can prioritize climate change and the cleaning of the oceans to help reverse the current effects?
I believe yes, because you know, I'm looking at the numbers. You know, like when Elizabeth was here 9 years ago, and what is happening now, the critical mass of these people is increasing on a daily basis. People are understanding more and more, which is something fantastic. So it all depends on when this critical mass will be enough to, you know, induce the change. And so far, it's not enough. But it's about the speed of change. You know, the speed of changes in climate, you know, and speed of changes in the ecosystems. It's not equal to the speed of changes in our society and the change of the thinking and the state of mind. So, you know, I think like Elizabeth and Carl and Rick, you know, you guys, um, this is our job. You know, and this is why I'm still here, because, you know, I don't speak to many different people, but, you know, I have an average 150 new students that I meet every year. And I have a chance to explain them something, you know, eventually to change their decisions that they make and that they will make in life. So we'll see, you know. But I'm still kind of optimistic in this side, you know. And there is something which kind of motivates me all the time, and especially, you know, if I'm down and if I hear some kind of ridiculous things from students, then I kind of just pause and remember because what has been driving me all these years was actually Winston Churchill. You know, and because he had this famous lecture, I think it was University of Minnesota after the Second World War, when they asked him how they beat the Germans against all odds, and he used only 5 words: never, never, never give up. That's it. So this is, I think, how we should all, and I think this is what we're doing. We're just not giving up. You know, I'm trying to convince, you know, the scientific community, because everything, basically today, when you look at science, there is no fundamental science anymore. Uh, Everything is applied. Everybody is pushing scientists to fund themselves, to write proposals, to get grants, to do this, do that. This is extreme pressure. So, you know, science is about having enough time to process the data that you're gathering, and that you have time to think about and what everything means. And if you're rushing and rushing and rushing, then things will pass, you know. And that was one of, for instance, my advantages in my scientific career, because I found out that most scientists don't read papers, other people's papers. So, you know, they follow the current literature in the past couple of years, and what was published 20 years ago that doesn't exist. So, for instance, you know, measuring primary productivity in the oceans doesn't give any results, because now when we kind of put all these data together and try to put it in a global model, the global carbon model for the oceans doesn't work. And I was talking about it, well, the last time I remember, 2004 in Bremerhaven in Germany. Because, you know, primary productivity measurements are underestimated, heterotrophic bacterial activity is overestimated, and then when you put all these together, and of course, that it doesn't work. It, you know, the model says that nothing from the surface ever reaches the seafloor. And I say, well, hello, what about all these communities on the deep sea floor? What do they live from? And I was on Ocean Visions, I think 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. And it was extremely interesting. There was this one guy, I forget, I think he's in Georgia or in Florida somewhere, studying sponges in deep sea environments. Says, well, we kind of believe that these organisms, they feed on what is falling from the surface. Well, of course, hello. So it's kind of really ridiculous. And it's all based because it was published in 1965 that marine phytoplankton lack half of the TCA cycle, or the Krebs cycle. So if you don't have a complete Krebs or TCA cycle, you cannot make amino acids. So how do they do that? Because they have to do it now in conjunction with bacteria, because bacteria they do. And this is how the ocean is organized. And even though I published this in 2003, the scientific community still resists. And I say, well, you know, when will you change? Because, you know, when you look at measurements of primary productivity in the Sargasso Sea, you know, because they still use these black bottles, they kind of incubate the sample in a transparent bottle in the light, and then in 2 bottles in the dark, and then they subtract the values because this represents heterotrophic activity. And in Sargasso Sea, everything that you incubate in the dark, the values are always higher. So I said, we have to look at this from a different perspective. So it takes a lot of time, you know, even for the scientific, well, at least, you know, what you're saying, there is a consensus about global warming and climate change. Well, it's kind of very difficult not to understand it in this way, because I think we can all feel it together. You guys have snow, and, you know, I'm in t-shirt, hot. So, and why am I doing this? Because I believe we have to talk. We have to exchange ideas, exchange understanding. Because, you know, there was, I think last week in one of the lectures, one student said, "Hey, professor, I don't agree with you." And said, "This is great, fine. Finally, somebody." And I said, she said, "I think what you're saying is wrong." And I said, "Well, okay. Uh, I'll be happy to hear your arguments, but you know, you can't just say no. You have to prove that I'm wrong. So let's compare the arguments." And then he started understanding. Oh, it's not just about believing; it's about, you know, understanding. And to understand, you also have to know something. You have to collect information. So it's not about that we all have to read, you know, tons of scientific papers. But, you know, I read some things, Elizabeth reads some other things, and then we talk and we exchange. And this is how the understanding develops in the society. And this is what we have to continue doing. And that's why I'm always happy, you know, when such an opportunity arises that, you know, I can say my understanding. So I think you've heard me talking about it because, you know, what am I doing? I'm not telling facts. I'm just communicating how I understand all these facts and what these facts mean to me. So this is important.
Thank you so much, Stasha. I did share in the chat the link to the Ice on Fire HBO documentary.
Oh,
I thought that might be something that people would find interesting. So I hope they check it out and share it with their students or friends.
yeah, Elizabeth, it was funny, you know, Carl sent me an email a couple of days ago. Says, he was looking for a video to show to his students, and then he looked at the Ice of Fire and he heard a familiar voice. Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah, he mentioned that to me too. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah, well, I think it's good. Yeah, there was a lot of effort. But, you know, just to tell you a little secret, the mastermind behind Ice and Fire is Leo's father.
Mm.
He is the one. So, you know, we were kind of talking for 1.5 years before they came and filmed me. So they filmed me in Zagreb and in Patja. I don't know how many hours, 15 hours, and then I appear in only like 4 minutes. Yeah. All right then. Well, it was very, very nice to be with you all. And well, at least I hope you like my photographs and movies.
Thank you